is, let me check, October the 19th. It's Wednesday. This is history class. We're recording for our missing classmates, some of whom are having fun, the others of whom are not having fun because being sick is not very fun.
Are you going to stay home?
Yeah.
Well, not if you're really sick. It's not fun. If you're just staying home because you're generally like quarantining, that could be fun. But all right, we just finished spending time in group work, those of you who are online, and we're moving on now to 4 new note cards you need to make. Everybody has note cards out? 4 note cards.
What chapter?
It's chapters 11 and 16. So the first 2 are from chapter 11. The next is from chapter 16. All right, let's focus in. Today I am going to tell you more stories than
I don't have extra markers.
you're supposed to have found them. Today figure out how to write them down. Today I am going to tell you some extra stuff besides what I asked you to write down about the 2 musicians we're covering, Mozart and Beethoven. And so the first one we're talking about, an Australian classical composer who wrote operas, symphonies, concertos, and masses. He died at a young age. His name, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, wasn't actually his full name. I will tell you now his actual whole name, just maybe to inspire you for when you're trying to name your children when you grow older. His name was Johannes Chrysostomus Wolfgangus Theophilus Mozart.
Wow.
Do you want me to repeat it in case you wanted to grab it?
Yes.
Johannes Chrysostomus Wolfgangus Theophilus Mozart, otherwise known as Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Wolfgang, I think that's a good name.
Wolfgang. All right, Clayton, you are always supposed to have cards here.
Wolfgang.
These are my cards. You are supposed to always put cards on here.
Wolfgang.
All right, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart is, many people think of him as the first rock star. And I'll explain to you why in a few minutes. But first, his childhood. He began to play the piano when he was 4 years old, as many of these prodigies did. But he, at the age of 5, try to imagine a 5-year-old you know. Please stop clicking your pen. At the age of 5, he was writing a composition. So he composed music at age 5. You probably have a sibling who's about 5, Garrett. No. Well, you have to imagine that. But and when he was a 6-year-old, his father took him and his sister on tour. And he was a youthful prodigy in the most profound sense of the word. In 30 years, he had a very short life. He only lived to be 35. But in 30 of his years, starting with age 5 and ending at age 35, in 30 years, he wrote more than 630 pieces, including 27 piano concerti, 42 symphonies, and 22 operas. Now, I just want to pause and say that for me to tell you he wrote 42 symphonies is not like me telling you that Taylor Swift wrote 42 songs. Those songs might be 3.5 minutes each, and they have repeated musical lines with maybe a bridge and maybe a chorus. To write 42 symphonies is to write for lots of different instruments, an entire symphony of instruments, to write the music in the pieces for very long works of music. It is amazingly impressive to write one symphony.
She could.
Maybe. It would be a challenge for her to write one. But to write 42 of them and 22 operas. Operas have extensive storylines that have to be set to music. For him to do all of that was amazing. He was a international celebrity. Is everyone finished with this card? He was an international celebrity. These are the two works of art that I want you to know. He spent almost his entire life on tour. Does this sound familiar?
No.
Do you think about when I'm switching over to think about him like a modern day rock star. He stormed through 70 cities, royal courts, and his antics make some of the rock stars today look angelic. He invented this persona. Have you ever heard of people talk about rock stars like this? Out of control, child superstar with very controlling stage parents. You've heard of that?
Yes.
It's all the time, especially those Disney stars. Controlling stage parents who are promoting their kids at a young age, and then the kids grow up and they're out of control.
And they're weird.
And then the parents are trying to still make money off of them.
Oh,
Mozart had the same thing going on.
Free Britney.
But it was centuries before there was a rock star culture like that. He was unique in his era also because he did not have the support of a church or a royal court. In these days, most people had, like, the church would be sponsoring them and paying all their expenses, or the royal court would sponsor them and pay all their expenses. He was an independent artist. He was a freelancer. He only worked when he pleased and only worked for whomever he wanted to work for. He was also, by the way, pretty poor because he also didn't manage his money very well. He spent it, and he married a woman who loved to spend money too. So even if he needed the money, he never would work for the royal court or for the church. He was also a social trickster. He did not respect kings, emperors, nobility. He was disrespectful in general. It was very uncommon for that period. It's really no surprise that most of his operas deal with silly nobles who get the kind of their comeuppance. Some poor person proves them wrong. All right, this right here is from The Marriage of Figaro. Make sure you finished the note card here. Now listen, you might recognize it. Remember what I said about him. Think of him like that. The ladies loved him. They swarmed around after him. You gotta think of him more like that. He was, in his day, a rock star who wrote really amazing music. What's a rock star?
I like
I don't think I'm electric guitar. I'm trying to do that.
I'll show you the picture of Beethoven. He looks a little bit more like that. But it's some of the pictures of Mozart show like crazy. I used to tell my children, try to listen for a storyline in the music, and you can hear it in this. You can imagine. You can imagine characters. You can imagine exciting events happening. Maybe. Don't break that table.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, a roof chase. I like that. What do you see, Lydia? There must be something dramatic happening too.
Sounds like a circus.
They're not just dancing.
Sounds
they're
like Tom
dancing
versus
in
Jerry.
Something.
Oh,
Yes.
Tom
All right. This was not the
Oh.
only. He also
Oh.
wrote, like you
Who's
said,
that?
the
Joe.
Don Giovanni. This is the dark opera that he wrote after his dad died. Storyline before you get to it. Don Giovanni, who is Don Juan, has killed the commandor while defending his daughter early in the opera. Then he goes and mocks the man's statue and invites him to dinner as a joke. He's just going and making fun of a statue and says, "Why don't you come to dinner?" The statue speaks to him with a ghostly voice and agrees to come to dinner. Later at dinner, Don Giovanni and his servant are shocked when the statue actually arrives. And this is what happened next. Audrey, you want to cut off the lights? We're going to watch a bit of this. So you can see that operas are pretty fascinating. This guy's really scared. That's why he's like, "We're dead. I can't help." So here he's saying, "I don't need your food because I'm dead. I eat food after death. I don't need the mortal food." And then what he does is he invites him to come. I'm going to skip ahead. He says, "Come to dine with back to the grave. That's why the servant doesn't want him to go. When he has to go to the grave. So he does go to dinner with him. And now he tries to drag him into the grave and they're fighting. Drags him back into the grave, he's dragging him down into hell. And it sort of goes like this. Alright. So that was Mozart. Now let's switch over to Beethoven. Yes, Beethoven is lesson 16. Yes.
So in the second Sherlock movie,
Uh-huh.
that like song or the whole opera.
This is perfect for Sherlock. Well, that's awesome. Yes, it has this. It has the sense that Sherlock likes to grab that vibe. I love that. I love it when they use this. Write it down. So the second one, lesson 16, the second composer is Beethoven, a brilliant German classical composer who wrote 9 symphonies while he was going deaf, as well as he also wrote 6 concertos and 32 sonatas. His music is extremely famous. I think you have heard a lot of it. His name, Ludwig von Beethoven, and there's really nothing more to it. That's his name. He was born during the time of the American Revolution in Germany, of course, and his symphonies were going around Europe during the time Napoleon was taking over Europe. So if you're trying to place them in time, it's really the exact time we've been studying. He had a very hard childhood. He started playing when he was 4 years old. His father was poor and made money as a music teacher. So his father was his music teacher. And by the age of 7, his father was forcing Beethoven on the road to perform in order to make money that the father would take and use for the family. Beethoven became very famous during his lifetime. His music was beautiful and inventive. When people expected one thing, like soft parts, there would be loud. When they expected loud, there would be soft. It was very much in reverse. But his increasing hearing loss really caused him to be tormented. And I'm going to tell you a story about how he was losing his hearing after you write down these 3 pieces that I want you to know. The first one, Beethoven's Fifth.
What was his full name?
Ludwig von Beethoven. But Beethoven's Fifth is the one that says da 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 da, and you know it. It's right here. This is Beethoven's Fifth Symphony.
Is this song called Da 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 Da?
That's what you have to write down. It's enough, isn't it? You know what I'm talking about?
What was Beethoven's favorite fruit?
Oh.
Banana.
All right.
Star Wars.
Moonlight Sonata. If you've ever practiced piano or had proper piano lessons, you may have learned to play the Moonlight Sonata.
I'll have to.
Tell us if you have. Anybody in here learned this one? You're going to hear it soon. Moonlight Sonata is one of the most admired sonatas. It's beautiful music. His sonatas are just gorgeous. Make sure you've written all of this down on your card. As you're writing, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Beethoven's hearing loss. So pretty, isn't it? He composed 9 symphonies with only the faint ability to hear, like with a cone, barely hearing the beats. He still composed the symphonies, and by the 9th, he could not hear at all.
He had every music note just about it memorized.
All in his head. Now, when the 9th Symphony premiered, the first time it was ever played, it was a great success. But of course, he couldn't hear anything, but he wanted to conduct. So this is what happened. Beethoven did conduct. He stood in front of the conductor's stand, and he did all the conducting. He threw himself around like a madman. At some points, he would stretch up to his full height. At other points, he'd be crouching down to the floor. He would flail his arms and his hands while he's conducting the music to the 9th Symphony. But there was actually another conductor behind him, and the musicians were told to follow that conductor. So even though Beethoven was doing that, he was actually off of the music. He wasn't in time with the music. And when it finished, the audience applauded. They rose to their feet 5 different times. They gave him a standing ovation, but of course he couldn't hear it. So the conductor had to turn him around. He was about 4 bars. He was bars off of the thing. So he's still conducting when the whole thing was over. Imagine that. The thing's over, everyone's applauding, and he's still up there conducting the orchestra. So when he finished, they turned him around, and he saw the whole place on their feet, cheering wildly. They were waving handkerchiefs because they knew he couldn't hear. They were just throwing their hands up in the air and waving the handkerchiefs. And this right here was kind of like their response was breaking out to jubilation. So, of course, we need to hear a little bit of what this is, and you're going to recognize it. We're going to listen through this thing, and I'm going to read you that prayer again. So there's a lot of this, but the Ninth Symphony also always has voices. Yes.
My grandma's in a choir, and she did like the Richmond something,
Mm-hmm.
the symphony, and it sounded a lot like that, but it was like in German.
That is German. That's why you couldn't hear all the words to it. There is a hymn that's to the same tune, but that's a German song because he was German. All right. So I told you we were Wesley.
My dream job is to write music and then compose it, especially for a movie.
That's amazing. Yeah, movies are where classical composers are still needed today. If you listen to the soundtracks of most movies, it's really complex music like that. All right, so let's close with Beethoven's prayer again. Now listen, instead of packing up, listen to what it would sound like for a person to have a prayer like this, a person who had gone deaf and desperately wanted to hear music, and yet he only had it in his head. Lord God, give me victory over myself, that nothing may imprison my life. Be the guiding light of my heart. Lift me up from the dark depths. May my soul be caught up in your wisdom. Fight its way upward in fiery flight, for you alone understand me, and only you can give me the power to keep going. It was a hard life to be deaf when everything in you wants to hear music, but he still left beautiful music for us. And that's it, Beethoven and Mozart.